Number 17 asks you to find the values of theta where r is 0, so find the zeros, and the maximum r, and then where is theta when the maximum occurs. And this is to help you graph. So let's find the zeros first. So the zeros would be set the equation equal to 0. 0 equals 6 sine 5 theta. Now notice it's between 0, theta, and less than pi. That means you only go to pi, and you don't even go to pi. You go right before pi. So we'll talk about that in a second. So this means if you're trying to solve for sine, you get sine of 5 theta is equal to 0. So where is sine equal to 0? That is what we would put for 5 theta. So sine is 0 at 0 and then at pi. Now this says go to pi, but it has an angle of 5, so you have to multiply. If it was 0 to 2 pi, you'd multiply the 2 pi by 5, but it's 0 to pi, so you would have to go out, keep going to 5 pi, right before 5 pi, so less than 5 pi. So you multiply whatever angle is by what your domain is. So it's 0, pi, and then it would be every pi after that, right? So then it would be 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. Now that's for the 5 theta. And so theta is 5 divided by those. So 0 over 5, pi over 5, 2 pi over 5, 3 pi over 5, and 4 pi over 5. And the 0 is just 0, so I'm going to change that to just 0. So that's what the zeros are. 0, pi over 5, 2 pi over 5, 3 pi over 5, and 4 pi over 5. Okay? So that's how you do it when it has a bigger angle. You need to really pay attention to that, because a lot of you could not do it if it had a larger angle. So that's the zeros. The next thing we want to go for is the absolute value of r. What's the largest r can be? So remember, we take whatever our angle is. So our angle is sine of 5 theta, and that has to be less than 1 and less than negative 1. So when you do r, you just substitute in 1 or negative 1 for the angle. So this is 6 times, let's do the 1 first. So the absolute value of 6, this is times, by the way, not plus. That was another mistake some people made. So absolute value of 6, and then r also can be 6 times negative 1, which is the absolute value of negative 6. So sometimes r is 6 and sometimes r is negative 6. So let's find the angles where that occurs. So theta equals what? Okay, so you would say, take the number 6, that's new r, equals 6 sine of 5 theta. So you put the 6 in, and so sine, I'll just do it here, sorry, sine of 5 theta is equal to 1. Now that's when it's equal to 6. It also can be equal to negative 6. So you have sine 5 theta, it can be equal to negative 1. So when is theta equal to 1 or negative 1? So you would say, when is sine equal to 1 or negative 1? So that would be what 5 theta is. And remember, we've got to go all the way out to 5 pi, right before 5 pi. So 5 theta would be at pi over 2. And then it's negative 1 at 3 pi over 2, right? And then keep going, because you've got to go all the way to before 5 pi. So add another 2 pi to pi over 2. That would be 5 pi over 2. Add a 2 pi to 3 pi over 2. That would be 7 pi over 2. And if we go one more, if we add a 2 pi to 5 pi over 2, we get 9 pi over 2. And 9 pi over 2 is is going to be okay. So that's still good. But if we go one more, 7 pi over 2 plus 4 pi over 2 is 11 pi over 2. And that's past 4 pi. So we've gone as far as we could for 5 theta. Now theta, you divide by 5. So this is pi over 10, 3 pi over 10. Then it's 5 pi over 10, which is pi over 2. 7 pi over 10, and then 9 pi over 10. And notice now we're in our domain of going right before pi. So those are our angles. So we would write r, absolute of r equals 6 at theta equals and that. Now remember, this is positive 6, this is going to be negative, this is positive 6, negative 6. Positive 6. So that helps if you were trying to draw it out, but we're not graphing it. So it's just those two things. That would be the answer for number 17.